All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Sprint 1 presentation. We are Team CodeSaurus, and the idea we're proposed is Quest. It's a journey into the unknown, and the choice is up to you. Just a quick overview about what our project is, or the idea we're proposing is, well, if you identify as anyone who every now and then looks for a quick escape from everyday life, with Quest, we bring you an adventure that's yours to control. All you have to do is roll the dice, follow the story, and see where your choices lead you. This is our agenda for today, and we'll start by quickly getting to know the team, and we'll move to an overview of our work for the previous sprint, which was Sprint 0.
Hello, I'm Ayla Hate, and I'm the backend developer of the project.
Hi, I'm Clive Lewis, and I'm the developer slash tester.
Hi, I'm Dhruv. I'm the Scrum Master and the developer for this project.
Hi, I'm Dylan. I'll be the full stack developer here.
Hello, my name is Farham Kademi, and I'm team lead and also a developer on this team.
And I'm Sharon D'Souza, and I am the full stack developer. So some of the improvements or the feedback that we incorporated from our previous sprint was having quick introductions before we start, including the market research for our product so our audience can better understand what we're trying to do. We've updated our schedule to show more clearly what functionalities we will be incorporating in our sprints. And we've updated our wiki pages with the respective links that were previously missing, and they will be continued to be updated after our presentation today.
So to quickly go over what we discussed already in Sprint Zero, the problem that we're solving is we're trying to create a novel or a game that can give you unlimited flexibility in being able to do anything within the environment that you're in. So we are trying to create a application that helps people with lack of imagination and creative inspirations and trying to create a realization of a story that lives in your mind, and it's going to be an effective way to work through creative blocks. And Quest tackles these challenges by using an AI-driven narrator to help create a story that has multiple outcomes throughout the story, throughout the novel. So the more about the project, a little bit more detail about it. So Quest is an interactive web-based platform that allows users to interact with an AI novel, and it allows users to go into a world without any barriers, meaning that they can kind of lead and do as they need within the world to shape the story. The intent to blend compelling story with player agency, and it allows readers to shape the narrative by making choices that directly impact the story's progression. And yeah, so these choices are influencing character relationships. They can change story outcomes and provoke ethical dilemmas. And to be decided, this is more like creative routes within the game is to add like unlocking secret plots throughout the game by typing specific um, messages. This is kind of like a homage to a product that is also in the market, but it's very old and is not AI driven.
So, coming to the team working agreement, just giving a brief overview, as these are the particular items that we discuss when it comes to communication expectations that need to be maintained when you speak or have any form of meeting. Uh, when it involves various meeting schedules and patterns to be followed during each meeting to make sure everything is in place and we stick to our timeline. Uh, can you move to the, yeah. It also speaks mainly about how team dynamics and certain principles should be followed when we are working with anyone with the team, or how certain processes need to be followed. And finally, speaking about what do we consider as a task being completed and how descriptive and how detailed a checklist should be completed to say that a task has been completed.
So for our product, we have narrowed down our user personas into three specific categories of users that we think would interact with our product. We'll quickly walk through each of them. So the first persona is a working mom who is busy and never really finds time to follow her passions or join her book clubs. So the way she would interact with our product is it would just give her a space to do what she loves, but in her own time and in her own space, and she can enjoy it whenever she likes. The next one is John. So John is someone who looks for creative inspirations and he looks for them everywhere. Being a writer, he struggles with creative blocks, and our product would be something that would help him work through these creative blocks and just be an easy way, an interactive way for him to do his work. The next is the gamer persona. So if one of our user types is someone like Jason, who is just looking for something fresh in the market every now and then, something that he can come back to over and over again without really being bored. And our platform gives him a chance to do that.
So to quickly again go over the overall MVP that we have for the entire project that we're trying to accomplish is that we're trying to create an AI-driven interactive novel that has visual elements. Now, for Sprint One, we've highlighted the stuff that we accomplished, and we're going to be discussing them more in detail throughout the presentation. But to kind of give you a general overview of what the MVP that we have for this Sprint One is that it has dynamic narratives. You can have unlimited choice systems, and it has a very simple UI that can be used with everyone and very kind of easy and intuitive to use. Um, so besides that, we're going to be working on adding visual elements such as enemy and NPC portraits, and also potentially a pause and resume. And this is still to be decided, but this will help the game to kind of continue progress at any time. And yeah, you can go to the next slide now. So yeah, these are the enemies that we're trying to be adding into the game, and the other NPCs that are going to be in there that can help the character kind of progress their story. And so our thing is that our solution, we're trying to kind of take a spin on an old solution. And this is because the technology that is currently available to us right now is going to help us to do things that are much more adventurous, even or creative with an interactive novel. So to quickly go over them, um, yeah, actually, previously, yes, there was a game named Zork, and this was the initial game that kind of influenced these interactive novels. Before that, obviously, it was the book that you would turn pages on, whereas then the Zork game came and it became more of a you would use it on command prompt kind of UI. Whereas ours is going to be more enhanced immersion and also have multiplayer and other accessibility features. So, and yeah, and this one is also another company that is doing something similar to ours, which is AI Dungeon. But again, like they also do AI generation stories where you do any input, the user can put any input and it will create a story based on that. But the immersion of it is not that good because the stories are also all very long and there's not much visual or any sound cues that could make the game more interactive. And our goal is to kind of resolve these solutions and provide solutions to these issues.
So the technology stack that we came to a consensus on was using JavaScript and React as a front end, OpenAI, Node.js, and Express.js as the backend. In the previous sprint, we were planning to also implement Python, but for now, we are moving forward with this technology stack as this is most familiar across the team. Database, we are using MongoDB as our database solution. And for tools, we are using Jira, GitHub, Slack, Visual Studio Code, and we will be adding on to the list as and when we require. So the major components that we can break down our project into, and these components actually helped us develop our stories as well to compartmentalize them in such a way that we can approach them logically and divide the task accordingly. The components are the player status manager, the game status manager, AI LLM model manager, and the prompt generator. Now, these four components are basically classes in which we can derive our stories from. And as you can see, each class has its own specialty. So the project schedule that we have was Sprint 0, which we wrapped up before this sprint, Sprint 1, and we made changes according to the feedback that was given. Sprint 2, these are the planned changes that we have in Sprint 2, where we'll be focusing more on covering up any bases that we missed in Sprint 1 and also starting with the main integration of our code. And in Sprint 3, we will be adding all of the bells and whistles remaining.
So now we're going to be beginning with things that we've worked on in Sprint 1's plan. So this is the architecture diagram that we have. So the user is going to be communicating with the front end, which we're using React in there. And this is where all the information is going to be taken from the user and be communicated with the backend. The backend is going to use the database and the narrator to create the interactive novel and present it in the front end for the user. So we've kept it very simple that and also created it in a way where it can be easily scaled and be added onto it. And this is our ER diagram to show how our databases being connected with each other. So as you can see that we have stories and we have themes and game session logs and characters. Stories and themes are going to have a one-to-many relationship with stories taking the theme ID. In game session and stories are also going to have a one-to-many relationship with the story ID being again stored in game session. And characters, we have the character ID stored in the game session. Again, one-to-many relationship. And we also have the logs where it's one-to-many relationship, but towards the logs instead of towards the game session, like the previous other collections that we have. In this case, each game session can have many logs. So we've included the session ID into the logs collection.
So, talking a bit about the context diagram, the diagram specifically focuses on the various external systems that are interacting with our central engine per se, that is our API, which helps dynamically adapt the storyline as it goes. So, a pretty simple flow would look like where the user initially selects his theme from the theme selection screen, which passes from the theme selection screen to the game window screen. And then a new game is started, which is sent to Quest to create another session ID, and which would be stored in the respective database as an external system. And so then Quest as a central engine would then have back and forth interactions with the game window screen, providing various responses or processing the requests as they come. And based on the story that is pulled from MongoDB, we would generate the required prompts to extract the required responses from the OpenAI model. And that's how the control flow of the game would work and be controlled from the central Quest game engine.
Yeah, so this is the sequence diagram. Based as you saw on the architecture diagram, there are five players here: the player, the front end, the back end, database, and narrator. I will run you through the flow. It's quite long, but I will run you through the flow. Um, when the player initially starts, he wants to start new game. He clicks select new game, and to select a story, you need to get the themes first because each story is categorized by themes. So the front end sends a API call to the backend asking for the themes. The backend takes it from the database, returns it to the backend. Backend takes it from MongoDB. MongoDB gives it back. The theme goes to the front end. It's displayed. User sees all the themes. Next, the player wants to select, will be able to see the theme, selects which theme he wants, and based on that, he wants to get all the stories. So the front end again sends another API call to the backend. Again, MongoDB gives the stories to the backend and gives it back to the front player. Now the player has the game, has a theme, uh, and the story. Like so, he selects which story he wants. He enters the character details, and he starts game. So he's the front end. All the front end does is take this information of which story is selected, which characters, what character description is given, and sends it to the back end. This is enough information to start a game. So here the front end says, okay, now backend, you're good to start a game. It goes ahead, it creates a session, gets a session ID for that, creates characters, links that characters to the session ID, and then can you go next slide? And then it goes and takes the initial story prompt from the story that was selected and returns it back to the backend. All this information is useful to start the game, and that initial story is fed back to the front end. From now on, all messages sent to the backend will include the session ID just to refer which session, so the backend knows which session it's referring to and update those logs and so on. So the next part, which is written as loop while session active, is when the player keeps making choices. So every time the user wants to make a choice, like progress in his story, he enters into the input box and in the front end, and that's when he hits send, it will send a post call called play turn to the back end. This post call will have what the user has inputted and the session ID. As I said, session ID will always be passed, so I will not be repeating that anymore. But it sends the message that the user said. The backend will then store that choice along with the last story prompt as a log. Then it will go ahead and retrieve all the story logs. And using all this information, it will send it to the narrator. The reason we're sending all of it is so that the narrator never forgets the story, the timeline of the story. So every action is, what do you say, accounted for and makes sense. So that, yeah. And then the narrator will use this information, generate the next progression of the story, and return it to the backend. The backend will then save it on the database and also simultaneously. No, I'm not done. Actually, it's here. Actually, keep it. Um, and then send it to the front end. The user will see the updated story as a new chat message. This goes on till the story reaches its natural conclusion, or if the user wants to end the game, which is the next part, which is manual end. So, in case the user wants to end a game, we only have manual end on the sequence diagram for now. The user will click the endgame button. The front end will send that endgame post call to the backend. The backend will then mark it on the database as is completed and return the endgame message. Either if it is a manual end, it will say game has manually been ended, and this will prompt the front end to delete the session ID so that if the user starts another game, it, the backend will know how to create a new session. Another reason we're keeping session ID is that actually this will be explained during the application demo, but another reason we're keeping the session ID is so that in case the player loses connection or refreshes the screen, he can continue. So yeah, that is it.
So a quick overview of the product backlog that we're doing for the entire project, because it's going to be very long, and we're going to go in more details on within each sprint what we're going to be doing exactly within each of the product backlogs. So this is a general overview that we kind of prioritize them using Fibonacci numbers. And this kind of helped us to see much easier which user stories are more important and will help us create the Sprint 1 MVP. And If you go to the next one, you will see that we just have, can you click? Yeah, this is the next one. Yeah, these are all for Sprint 2, and we are going to be um, discussing them in the future slides. But yeah, so this is just going to be covering them all from the most prioritized to the least prioritized user stories. So you can go next. Yeah. And yeah, so after we created the Fibonacci, like ordered them based on Fibonacci numbers, we realized that they were automatically within a kind of category, like a scheduled looking category from right to left. Being sprint one is the stuff that we've completed, and some of the stuff is going to be carrying over to sprint two. We will be discussing those in the other slides that are going to be coming up. But yeah, so sprint one is the stuff that we covered. Sprint two is going to be coming up, and sprint three are going to be the final things that we're going to be putting into the application, which are going to be mostly accessibility and making the application more user friendly for everybody.
So, talking about the Sprint 1 backlog, these, as Farham previously explained, we came to a conclusion that these particular stories were very important for the base of the entire product. And speaking about some of the features when it comes to how the dynamic story pivot needs to take place, how the story needs to maintain its consistency, whether it comes to using descriptive models with a larger parameter count, display story history, and have it in a scrollable view, and having preset options for themes so that there is not a lot of confusion when it comes to using our product, and um, specifically about the main character builder prompt such that we can have pre-written characters and have some form of description for it as well. It We decided that we would split these according to who felt more comfortable working with what feature set, and each person was responsible for one particular task, as you can see highlighted in bold. um, each story was then subdivided into various subtasks which are assigned to their respective team members, and they were expected to collaborate among themselves and deliver these sprints by the end of the sprint. So talking about the test cases specifically for the first story, the story mainly speaks about how we are supposed to have an interactive novel where the choices dynamically shapes the story, where every choice that we make needs to have some form of repercussion to the story. And for this story we developed several critical test cases, specifically for the first one, where our story properly adapts to player choices, where our tester Sharon verifies that our story properly adapts to player choices and has confirmed that it works as expected. The AI successfully branches out into various narratives differently based on user decisions, and we are seeing distinct story paths emerging depending on what choices players make. Speaking about the second test case is how earlier choices have an effect on later events. This ensures that there is a butterfly effect of some sort, where the where you're choosing where there could be an instance where you chose to pet a cat in chapter 2, and that would have some form of consequences later on. And this is also something that was verified in our test cases. Speaking about the next test case where the AI handles unexpected inputs, Faram specifically tested this really well and concluded that it is able to handle random, irrelevant, or unexpected inputs, and the AI still manages to give a meaningful response without crashing or becoming erratic. Our error handling seems to be quite robust. And finally, speaking about TC1004, it focuses mainly on consistent having a consistent story structure throughout the experience. As you can see this from the screenshot itself, the system maintains a narrative coherent to what was previously said, and this ensures that the players don't end up in some bizarre narrative or in a dead end scenario wondering how exactly did I end up here. And uh, based on all these test cases, we seem to have passed it with flying colors, which means our interactive storytelling engine is performing exactly as expected. So yeah.
So moving to the my user story is that in this user story, uh, it's kind of more of like an enabler. Like it allows the first most prioritized the user to do its like continuity and maintain story in a logical development. So this user story is as a user, I expect the AI to introduce unexpected but logical story developments. So the test case that we did for this one was to make sure that it's maintaining a good story continuity. So when you start a session, you input multiple decisions. It will maintain the story as in if you at one point of the story state that you've written something onto the ground, it will be stored into the database and the AI will refer into that if later on you ask for what did I write on the floor at this stage, and it will tell you that this is the quote that you like wrote on the ground. So Drew did this and we passed it. And we also went into doing the log storing, the AI generated twist using the session IDs. Oh, that's the next part. Yeah. But log store AI generated twist. So it will retrieve the logs from the database and verify if the AI is context is saved correctly. So the AI generated story twists are stored in the database under the correct session ID. And the last one is that if the story wants, like if the user wants to eventually get the session IDs, we want to have a route for it to be able to be fetched. So we kind of add a test to see if the database can kind of view all the logs that are related to a specific session ID. So Clive did this test and we passed the test.
Okay, so this following user story has like 5 test cases. I'll start with the first one. That is the game starting and will display the initial story. What this point does is basically the user just present the initial prompt, and this was tested by Farham and is also passed. And then the next one is when player tries to make a move, and then the test case would be that the player would be able to describe an action to the narrator, and text can be differentiated between narrator and user. And this was tested by me and was passed. The next one was to ensure a story history persists on refreshing. This one was when you try to refresh the page should be able to reload past actions and to be able to continue. This one was failed. We couldn't like figure out this one, and this was like tested by me. The next one was the scroll functionality. This was basically, for example, when there are too many messages, the program should have had the ability to scroll and view past actions if they are appeared. This was tested by me as well and was also passed. And the last one was auto scrolling behavior on new messages. So when the AI sends a new message, the window should scroll to the latest image, making the user's life easier. And this was tested by Farham and was also passed.
All right, so the next user story is as a user, I want an option to select a story with a theme so that I don't have to come up with a new one. This is the story uh, that works with having to give the users a set of preset themes and preset stories, so it's not too overwhelming initially, and they're not too overwhelmed with having to make too many choices or too many, let's say, uncertain scenarios for our AI model to deal with. And this is why this user story was brought up, so we can kind of give the user a box in which they can move around freely as part of an initial product development also. So the test cases for this user story mainly touch upon the initial interactions that the user will have with our product. So this one is the landing page that where all the information that the user would need to interact with our product would show up. It is clearly visible and does not obscure. The design is not too overwhelming or obscuring to the actual text that would be displayed. The next test case that was done was the themes page. All of the themes that we have preloaded into the model are displayed via an API call, and these were being correctly displayed when the user routes to the theme. Both these test cases were done by Dylan, and they both passed. The next one is the story page. So, like it was explained in the ER diagram by Farham, each theme will have associated stories for the user to pick from, so they kind of know what world they're set in. And the reason for this test case was to check if all the routes, if all the data and APIs work correctly, and they do, as confirmed by Clive. So this was the set of test cases we did for this user story.
So following up with the next user story, this was assigned to me and Drove. So we start here with creating a character that was basically like, and a positive result would be the data for character, and its attributes will be stored in database, and was passed and was tested by Farham. Then the next one would be like fetching all the characters, like getting all the data for characters that were already stored in the database. This was tested by Cleve and was passed. The next one was fetching characters by name. Like this was more specific than getting the characters, putting like a specific name. This was tested by Clive as well. But the next one was the character creation screen. This was like a pending task for this user story since we got a confusion. We had to like do this in the next sprint. So it's to be continued.
So
So
yeah, oh, yeah. So coming to the backlog stories that were completed, uh, looking at the various progress that was performed on on the first particular story, which is the heart of our application. It also involves implementing game completion logic for our interactive novel experience, and it ensures that the user choices generally shape the narrative path. We're basically building a choose your own adventure book. So as you can see, we allocated 55 story points to this user story, and we completed 49 points so far. That's about 89% of completion, which is excellent progress for such a complex feature. Breaking this down, we fully completed several critical components. We implemented the API to start a game session on March 6th, knocking down all 13 points. The AI generated story progression was completed on March 7th, also hitting all 13 points there. We've also finished the MongoDB integration for story and retrieving game state, claiming the 13 points required for those. And for API route handling, we delivered all the 3 points on March 8th. We've also implemented the game log retrieval per session, completing all the 5 points for that particular scenario. The only area where we are still working is on the game completion logic, where we completed 2 out of the 8 points. This logic that determines how the story would eventually conclude, and as discussed earlier, this requires some form of additional team alignment on handling different end scenarios, and hence we have currently set up only an end force end narrative for now. Overall, the story seems to be progressing nicely.
So now to talk about the progress of user story 12. Let's go back. I think it's one back. Yeah. So so in this user story 12, we defined a schema for storing AI generated context, but it unfortunately didn't get a full score because there is some errors in the schema because of the way we've set up the session ID being not session ID, but user input being a requirement. And it has to be kind of modified a little bit so it can maintain continuity after the refresh page. But we did get the create post to the store to store story transcript based on session ID. We can get those logs based on their session ID. and we've also registered API routes to communicate to the front end. But again, this was a little bit my mistake, but handling the invalid session ID errors, we have to kind of put them back onto the code because if there is, for example, any invalid database on the any database inputs from the side of the logs, there's not much try to catch errors within the code. So that has to be improved to ensure that the log system stays stable throughout the application's progress.
Um, yeah, I will talk about the next story, which is as a user, I want to read the created story. So, we tried to get a full scope, but I think we overestimated. I mean, we underestimated. Sorry, how much we could do. Most of it went fine. We can chat with the narrator. We can talk to the narrator. We can see it is scrollable. We can see past logs. But the main thing that did not work out, as Ayla mentioned before, was that fetch and display game logs per session actually fails during refresh. So it works in a way that we can fetch all the logs except the last log, and therefore it has lost points. But everything else seems to be working fine. And yeah.
All right, so the next user story is the option to select the stories and the themes without having to pick one. This user story served as the base for the code and the UI and all the themes that were built on further. The only place that it needed work was the API integration in a way where currently we're doing some manual filtering that were required on the front end, but those will be streamlined and enhanced more as we have more specific endpoints to route to. And other than that, everything else seems to work fine. The screens navigate correctly. The API routes are in there correctly. All the data is being retrieved right. And the design is also set to what was decided and is in line with the Figma designs.
Oh, so the last user story is describing the character. So out of 7 points here, two of them we couldn't have it done, like we explained. So the first one is creating the front end for inputting the character data. And the next one is integrating with the code to start the story. So as we talked about, we are pushing those to the next sprint.
Well, breaking down the sprint in terms of the story points, here is the breakdown that we are going to, like we stored for sprint one, and we are going to log it in a similar format in the future as well, where you already saw the Excel sheets in which we have the story points delivered and estimated. The metrics for sprint one are the total estimated points that we expected to deliver were 288. Total points delivered were 207. Total points carried over are 81, and team velocity is 207 as of sprint one. You can see the progress in percentage over there that we got from Jira. Now, this is just a graphical representation of the committed to completed ratio for our sprint one. The burn down chart. Now, the sudden spike in the burn down chart was because we, as a team, have to improve how closely we are updating our tasks on Jira, as there were instances where we had already completed the task, but we were late to update it on Jira due to a delay in communication, and which is what we have addressed and started improving towards the later part of the sprint. And as you can see, we are more consistent over there. So this is the whole board where we use these stories to derive the metrics in the previous one. I just wanted to add this point that we have also added stories, but not assigned points to them, which are convenient for us to track tasks, for example, sprint planning, API documentation, test case documentation, sprint 1 retrospective and recording, and etc.
Yeah. So we are going to be looking at the retrospective. So what went well, what went wrong, and what we're going to commit to the next sprint. So let's start off with what went well. Actually, surprisingly a lot. We fixed our meeting structures in such a way that now they will be more task-focused discussions, so that people who have to discuss about a particular task are only involved in that, so it doesn't bore everyone else. But we still do keep everyone else in the loop in a way that in overall meetings we do update them so everyone knows what everyone is talking about. Another thing that we have worked on is efficient time management, and I think that our meetings now end on time, stick to the agenda. If I crunch the numbers, there are like 30% less talking about our lives. And yeah, better communication. I think now that after sprint zero, we are more comfortable with each other, so we give honest feedback. And if we think something is not right, we speak up. Um, this is good so that we don't care about stepping on others' toes and no one takes it personally. On the technical side, the feature branches that we Git flow, basically. We started using Git flow, and the feature branches made it very easy to integrate code to main. And Figma on the design side really helped streamline our work and saved a lot of time. Open and honest communication goes back to better communication. We talk about we're open, we're friends. Uh, yeah. So now moving that good job everyone, first of all. And now moving to the bad part. So what could be improved, because we all have sins we need to atone for. So confidence in decision making. The one thing that we came to a conclusion on is that like we need to be confident in like saying our opinions, because like half the time we're discussing about things for like an hour, and then later we find out that the answer was right there in front of us, and like no one spoke up, like because they were not confident in their solution. But half the time, most of them actually, it was the correct solution. Another thing that we need to work on is faster response times, because they are painfully slow between members when they're working on the task. And we need to prioritize things better, like better way of scheduling things. And even uh, how can I say this? Yeah, we need to focus on how we schedule our meetings, because um, we need to prioritize that, because it affects everyone. If we have a poll to vote for a particular meeting time, we need to respond to that fast, not at the last minute and say that we cannot attend, because that affects the whole team and therefore the whole project. Uh, Another thing is the next few points I will discuss as a chunk. Basically, what we need to do in an overall is use Jira better, because that will help us track dependencies and we can find out our blockers. Then we can break tasks into smaller tasks that will make our lives more easier. And then we need more technical analysis and risk assessment, which I feel like Jira would do. But yeah, more technical analysis and risk assessment is needed, because pretending like our problems don't exist don't actually make them go away. For example, student loans. But moving on, our commitments. Uh, so there are a few things that we are committing for Sprint 2. Here, one thing is engage in more technical discussions. I feel like everyone should be comfortable speaking up, contributing ideas to during meetings, talk about more technical aspects of things, so that everyone is on the same page. And because in the end, it's going to affect each of our tasks, no matter if you're working on it or not. Then we'll need to work on Jira more, make it more structured, because one of the bad things that, like, not bad things, like, but yeah, bad things that happened were that things got blocked, and using Jira better would help us identify those. Then enhance teams coordination and frequent Jira updates. That is mainly better communication, participation about availability. Will help us stay aligned, help the team. Yeah, basically be communicative, help the team help you. And like, ghosting is for dating apps, not here. Anyway, so I think if we can do all this, Sprint 2 will be even better. If not, well, we'll be here again talking about this again. Yeah, you can move on.
All right, so we're getting closer to the fun parts, but before that, we will discuss what we're we have sort of planned for Sprint 2. So after everything we worked on in Sprint 1, we're going to move our MVP one step closer to what it's supposed to be. So in this sprint, we will be working more on integrating multi-feature game options. We will work a little more to improve our dynamic storytelling because it will include more players now. We will also do an improvement, or rather an enhancement, on player turns, as it will include more players. And the NPCs that Farham talked about at the very beginning, all his enemies and all his NPCs will go in here. The next part that we're trying to integrate for Sprint 2 into our product is a dice roll, which will be a metric for sort of unpredictability, where when the player or multiplayers make a move, their decision will not only be based on, well, what they want to do, but on this other unknown factor, which would be a dice roll. And for the NPCs, we will be writing some background stories so they don't become too vague or overwhelm our model. And we will constantly update our model's memory to store these NPCs. For Sprint 2, what we additionally will carry over is the backlog from Sprint 1 that the team talked about that we could not effectively integrate in the Sprint 1. And this is everything we will be taking with us, all our baggage we will work on. All right, now for the fun part, well, almost a little sneak peek into what our product is supposed to look like. So this is our choose your theme feature or choose your adventure. And then once you do that, we continue to the story selection screen. And then, well, you get to play the story that you picked. And now we will do the application demo. Sorry, one more part before that. And then we do the application demo.
Got too excited, huh?
So go ahead with our APIs. The first one is the theme and the story preset. The first one for fetching themes, we will use the endpoint slash API slash themes that will basically fetches all available themes from the theme database table. Then for creating the theme, we'll use the same endpoint, which will create a new theme with given title and description. For fetching story presets, we will use the slash APA slash stories that will fetch all available stories from the story database table. For creating a new story preset, we'll use the same endpoint, and this one will create a new theme with given title description, theme ID, and a given prompt. The next one is the character API. We will start with creating character from scratch. The endpoint we'll use is a slash character that will basically create a new character with the given data that we see over here. Then for fetching all the characters that we already have in our database, we'll get the get slash character endpoint that will give us information of the all stored characters in our database. The last one will be fetching the character by their name, more specific by giving a specific character query parameter a name that will retrieves all the characters from the database with that specific field that we were given.
Yeah, so here the game session APIs, these are all the APIs required to play the game once you have started it. I mean, also including start. The first endpoint is the start game endpoint. This is the endpoint required to tell the narrator which story you have selected and to also give you back the session ID so you can continue playing. Another thing it adds is the initial story prompt, which is part of the story, yeah, the story preset. Next one is play turn. This gets sent every time the user enters an input into the input box and sends it to the narrator so that the narrator can make the next story progression. After that is get game state. This is more of a utility endpoint where you can get the choices made for that current session to display it on the front end, but we're mainly using it to feed it back to the narrator so that the narrator knows um, what choices have been made till now and how the story is progressing till now. Manual endgame is our only current way to end the game other than natural progression. Where if you want to end the game because you are not happy with your decisions and you just want to like start all over, you can do it. Nothing like that in real life, but here. Um, Then the last one is get player choices. This one was for the front end where you can give back the all the choices so that you can display it on the front end. So if I refresh the screen and load back into it, all you have to do is send the session ID to the backend. The backend will give you everything that has been made till now, what the narrator said, what you said, and then you can display it. So yeah.
So I think this is gonna be the last one. So for this one, it's just a very simple one. There's two components where are it's to create the log and also to fetch the logs based on their session ID. So to create the log, the request type is a post, and it's gonna have an endpoint that is to logs. And the input body that it's gonna be, it's gonna take in a content user input and give it a session ID and store it into the database. And then the fetch logs transcript by session ID is just another way of being able to retrieve all the logs that you have based on their specific session ID. And if you look at the example output, you can see how it would show up on the database. And I think we can move on into the application demo. Oh, wiki page link. Yes, we're all excited.
Everyone is too excited.
So yeah, we can go through the wiki page. I think Ayla is gonna briefly talk about it.
So this is our wiki page. If you click on it, so we already discussed this on the Sprint Zero presentation. Like, is the same structure wiki page. The new thing that we will add in this sprint is just the documentation that we had created, and we'll just put it on the is I think is the latest one. Like, keep scrolling, is down. So I'll put the burn down charts here, sprint planning one, and then I think is test cases. If you scroll more down. So yeah, we'll assign here the user stories and acceptance criteria and the application test cases for this sprint. We'll keep this updated until tomorrow, I think.
For sure by tomorrow. I think now officially it's applications.
So much awaited. Wait,
Yeah.
Yes.
Print
I'll
one
stop my
and
share.
I'll share the screen, yeah. 1 minute. Here it is.
All right. After all this technical talk, we will actually see what we're talking about. Go on.
Yeah. You guys can see my screen, right? Can you guys see my screen?
yeah, we can
Yes.
see your
Yes, we can
screen.
see it, Dylan.
Yeah. I'm moving the Zoom controls around. Yeah. So this is our homepage. So beautiful, so nice, so demure. Uh, Quest, a journey into the unknown. The choice is up to you. Click continue to begin. That basic, no one needs explanation. These are themes. Again, so beautiful, so demure, so nice. You select the theme you want, and it'll give you the stories. So I'm selecting World of Dragons because dragons. This is the only story in that theme currently. There are more stories, but it's categorized for other themes. The Awakening in a world dominated by dragons, Young Warrior, Journey, Fire Breathing characters. Okay. Okay. So the game starts. The narrator gives you the initial prompt. Let's play. I'll read it out to you. Adventure begins. I'm kidding. The adventure begins. You discover an ancient dragon scale with strange markings that seem to glow when touched. It pulses with energy, hinting at an unknown secret buried deep in the dragon's realm. What do you do? Interesting. So that's the narrator. You get to make your move here and send it. So I'll say Um, I take a couple of steps back and prepare for a run up. I run up to it and attempt to kick a piece of it out. And then I'm done. And then I send it to the narrator to make a decision. It's the narrator's thinking what to do. With a burst of speed, you run towards the scale and land a mighty kick, sending a piece flying through the air. As it lands, it bursts into a flurry of sparks, revealing a parchment with a cryptic inscription. What do you do with the parchment? Obviously, I'm going to go read it. I am I go to pick it up and read its contents. The next part comes, and after this, I will stop because it just keeps going. Um, as you delicately pick up the parchment, its brittle surface dances under your touch. You manage to make out a couple of symbols and a map sketch, but the rest of the text is an unknown ancient script. What do you do with the cryptic parchment? So, yeah, this is the demo. The story will keep going. You can keep making decisions. You can even make any decision, funny decision or not, like which a normal novel will struggle to handles. Like I attempt to digest the parchment. An unusual move, you lift the parchment to your mouth and tear a small piece off with your teeth. The ancient paper takes off dust and time, but as you swallow, a sudden rush of complex ancient knowledge floods your mind. What do you want to do with this newfound understanding? And so on and so on. The story will continue. But yeah, this is how the story goes, and this is how our application is for the initial stage. More things will be added as discussed throughout the meeting, sprint two, and so on. Yeah, passing it on.
So I think that is the end of our Sprint 1 presentation. We are CodeSaurus, and good job, everybody. Hopefully, we can keep this energy and may give an even much better presentation for Sprint 2. So I created a much better MVP. So
All
with
right.
that, oh, do you want to say something?
Go ahead, go ahead.
I was gonna say with that we can conclude the presentation.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.